Well, we're still here and it's still Global Morning. A whole lot of discussions to delve into, and I don't know how. Since the country's moved from one consign
to another,
and
it is insecurity, it is the fuel crisis.
It's the fuel crisis. It's also the issue around power sector, which we talked about on the newspaper review segment, where we see a lot of money being popped into all of those concerns being raised, and of course, the World Bank also had come out to say there's a whole lot of concerns.
Well over 120 million people have now fallen into poverty.
And the poverty rate, and which is one concern, Nigeria's poverty rate saying it has hit 63%. That's despite the easing inflation.
Yes.
The World Bank has come out to say this is what the concern is, and the government has also highlighted a widening gap between macroeconomic improvements, and also the actual welfare of the households. So if you look at a lot of households, they're struggling with concerns, and then so we asked what about the government policies. Where is this coming from? And also we have the data which from the Bureau of Statistics, which talks about showed that the headline inflation dropped sharply from 34.80% in December 2024, where it got to 15.15% in December 2025. Also, the food inflation also declined significantly, falling from 39.84% to 10.84% within the same period. All of this concern, well, despite the easing of prices pressures, the World Bank also noted that inflation remains high enough to erode purchasing power with households' income failing to grow at a pace sufficient to offset earlier prices shocks. So all of these concerns, look at the inflation in Nigeria, look at all of these concerns, and
it brings a lot of question, because like the statistics are there saying, okay, we're making progress in terms of the numbers, statistics, but when you bring it back to the common people, are they better off than they were prior to this inflation figures? And the answer is obviously no. So those are questions that the economists would have to break down for us, because people are saying we need to see a connect between inflation getting lower and people's lives getting better. There should be a nexus, and if there's a disconnect, then that's a very big problem. So that's the question we're trying to answer today.
Okay, so while we're trying to answer all of those things, we also have what the coordinating minister of finance and economy, that's Wale, said the federal government still focus on policies aimed at lifting millions of Nigerians out of poverty, through the investment-driven growth and targeted social interventions. All of those concerns are also being raised because, of course, they understand that there are a lot of issues, dilly-dallying, and people are just finding a balance, even moving out from your house, going to the workplace.
It's not easy.
It's
because
not easy.
How much is transport now? How much is it previously?
Yes.
So those are really big concerns. And he said the government are trying to
make sure
bring policies that they ensure safety and even lift people out of poverty. But the World Bank statistics are saying different. So what is the government doing that is not working? What can they do better? What are those answers? So we're trying to answer, begging for answers. Questions are begging for answers, actually.
For answers, and we want to find out what those things should be like. Well, we also want to talk about some concerns where there's some debates around the world. We talked about the fuel reforms. We talked about movements. Smart policies, or is it ill-advised? These are the questions that one, because debating the World Bank's recommendation on the fuel market liberalization and social safety nets. Well, we want to now focus and see how Nigeria's fuel policy debate is once again in the spotlight, following fresh recommendations urging the federal government to fully liberalize the petrol market, allow increased importation, and expand social safety nets to cushion the impact. But of course, critics say this advice is not only ill-timed, but counterproductive, arguing it could deepen economic hardship, weaken local refining capacity, and further expose Nigerians to global price shocks. So these are concerns being raised, Mukhtar, and joining us to speak on this particular issue is no other person who's an economist who is vast. He understands this. He knows how to break it down. We want him to talk to us on the way forward. We have in the person of Dr. Ken, Professor Ken, if I'm not mistaken, Ken Ife, who's joining us virtually here. Good to have you join us on the program today, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we had to do an analysis around all the issues in Nigeria. So much to talk about, so much concerns. But you're an economist and you understand these things. So we want to talk to us about it. Would we say the reforms or the advice given by the world markets, would we say that advice is coming as a good one, smart policy, or is an ill advice from your perspective as an economist?
I think there are two sides to their advice. It's always good to start from the best part, the good part, so that we don't lose track. First of all, from economics point of view, development economics point of view, the long-term problem facing Nigerian economy, which is what is rendering it incapable of developing, is the import dependency of the economy. This economy was designed by colonists and reinforced in 1945 by a new global standard that says you must be exporter of raw material, and we in the West and in the North will process and bring them for you to consume. Now that is called specialization of labor production. Now, what that means is that when you export raw material, you are actually exporting your jobs and importing poverty. And then when you are earning 10% of a value chain to 15% by sending raw material, you have to borrow 100% to be able to afford the finished products. The people that make money are just the people who are in the middle end, adding value. So you are condemned to perpetually consuming and not being able to produce. Now, when you juxtapose that to Nigerian experience, you will find out, if you take one industry that you mentioned, I really love your analysis before we enter this discussion. If you take the oil industry, can you explain to me why 4 refineries owned by government and NNPC are dead, and all we preferred was to be importing refined products that cost us over $20 billion? And that has been the story. And whilst it's costing you over $20 billion to be importing them, you're actually importing substandard products that are injurious to your health and also involving predatory pricing. So you will never survive if you are processing anything in the country. Now, what does that actually mean in practice? It means that you are going to be forced to subsidize, and which was what happened. Government was borrowing 500 billion every month to subsidize a product in which it should be refining. So when all these things continue and corruption is so heavy in that area, the private sector decided to respond. Government has been aspiring to make this country a refining sovereignty. And suddenly, Dangote comes in and he beckoned on all the other people to come in. He put $20 billion and is beginning it to $40 billion. $50 billion is going to Ondo to refine. Bua is doing 200,000 barrels in salt. Suddenly, the whole private sector have woken up and they have all committed to making Nigeria self-sufficient and a sovereign economy. Now, government says, okay, my policy is to support this. And suddenly, World Bank comes to advise you not to go ahead and tell you to relax and start importing against not only the government policy, but against the PIA law. That law says prioritize the supply to local capacity, which they call DCO. That is what they call the DCO, which means an obligation. So it says, please give crude to those who are refining in the country before you export. So we are having that discontinuity. So that is the area that worried me so much. Otherwise, by and large, Central World Bank has always been good in many of the things because they have a very strong analytical engine, except that this time round, somebody's playing pranks with it. In terms of their GDP analysis, they're correct. They downgraded our, well, first is an upgrade from 4% to 4.1%, but we are more optimistic about 4.3, 4.5. They actually did 4.4, and they're revising it down because of the nervousness around the oil crisis. Then the growth drivers, they correctly recognize the growth drivers, ICT, finance, real estate, all of that. But don't forget that also oil increased in production. So that actually contributed a little, but the main drivers are the service sector without a doubt. Then on the top of laggards, they said that the laggards are agriculture. Yes, agriculture has been letting us down without a doubt. There was even a time last year, when it was 0.7%. So it is now going to 2%, 2.53%, but it's still below our population growth rate. which is 3%, and urbanization, which is the more important growth rate, is 4.6%. So we need to do a lot more work on agriculture. But it's not just agriculture, it has to be adding value processing. So that is why in the National Economic Council meeting I attended last month, I made it very clear that the strategy that will take us out of where we are is export-led growth strategy.
Trying to get back to us. I think he's having technical glitches there, network challenges there. I like the fact that he's broken this down and he's looking at we talked about agriculture earlier,
exactly,
and the value of onion, but he's also looking at all of this, how the food value chain, agricultural sector, all of this affects. Okay, we have it back. So basically, what you've given us down there, we were talking about before you joined us. We looked at the farming sector, the value chain of onion, and how they're faced with the insecurity challenges and how they still have to find a balance of harmony with the bandits and all the survival on that. But let's also stick to this World Bank arguing that allowing fuel importation will also improve competition and stabilize prices. But critics are looking at the mindset to say this undermines Nigeria's push for local refining and energy independence. As an economist, how do you see this balance? Is this really the picture it's painting for Nigeria, looking at the downturn and how effects we have on the agricultural sector from food prices and how this affects in a general way, basically?
Yeah, you see, this is the conclusion that was parachuted into an extremely good report, because there's no foundation for that conclusion. It's what is like saying conclusion from an inconclusive evidence. The evidence is, I'm a chief consultant, ECOWAS Commission for more than 15 years. I can never recommend this to any of the member states. Never do that. You can't come to a country that is struggling and suddenly have a vision of becoming economically independent, and then suddenly you say to them, no, reverse, go and start importing all kinds of things. Let us look at the evidence. The evidence is this, that Nigeria is sending crude to China. China has banned export of refined products. Even Russia, that is pouring cheap crude into the world, has banned export. Kazakhstan, they are banning export of the refined product, and you are telling Nigeria to abandon your own refining and then go and import from people who have already banned export of their refined product to you. So where are you sending them to? You are sending them to Malta, which doesn't have a refinery, which is one place that they could produce what they call African special blend, which is a polluted product that doesn't meet any international standard, and they package it and bring it in here. So, and then the law says, whenever you are bringing anything in, first of all, you must demonstrate that there is deficiency in the country's capacity. Secondly, all the stakeholders should be there to check the value of what you are bringing in. Neither NMPC nor NMDPRA has a laboratory, international standard laboratory, to check the value, because they know that the value is many times more than the limit. Sulfur limit is 50 ppm. They are bringing in 2,000 ppm sulfur. So, and that's it. But Dangote has, but they won't use it. So that is one. So the second thing is that we are building capacity, local capacity, that is far going to be in excess of Nigeria's demand, that will all be plunging us into export. And you are suddenly advising the country to abandon this measure and go into reckless imports to drain the foreign reserve and then drain even the exchange rate that we are getting. So that thing doesn't sit. And I don't know how the chief economists allow this to go through. They should investigate how this was parachuted into their report. You know, I was shocked, because I have worked for World Bank. I'm a consultant there. I could never ever allow this kind of thing to filter into an otherwise standard. Everybody expects this deployment report every time it comes out. And then you see a spurious element that enters into it that doesn't have any foundation. So that's part of it. But there are many other sides of it. So it depends on where you want me to go with this analysis.
All right. So my colleague Mukhtar, who's here with me, also has something to speak to you about the price.
Well, thank you very much, Prof, for the analysis to these points. But I'd like for us to look at price stability and also volatility, because the supporters have said that liberalization will bring efficiency. But in Nigeria's case, we've seen that we have a highly vulnerable market, and compared to global oil fluctuations and instability. So could this policy actually increase fuel price volatility, rather than give us stability that we are clamoring for?
Okay, let me put something to you. If we do not have Dangote today, what would have happened? Nigeria would have been facing a long queue for fuel, because you are not going to be getting it from China. You are sending your crude to, because they've already banned that. You're not going to be getting it from all the other countries. You will be getting it from a group that is bringing in some rejected, the standard Euro 4 and Euro 6, or Euro 5 and Euro 6. The people that are doing, those refineries that are doing these things cannot sell them in the countries because they don't meet the standard. So they have to smuggle them out and then start blending them. So so second thing you would have had was fuel would have been selling at 2,200 naira per liter to 2,500 naira per liter, and you will not get it because you'll be in a long queue waiting for it. And they will tell you, oh, transportation cost has doubled, insurance has that, they can't get it here. That is the story we would have been going through today. But now turn around and said, okay, Dangote is in. What's the situation? The situation is that he has capacity to exceed what Nigeria needs. They are doing 65 million liters today of PMS. Nigeria's consumption is 35 million, but they are telling you that it is 40, it is 50, it is 60, it is 65, because they are selling the refined product across the border. Now, let's also look at the price. Nigerian's price is less than $1 per liter. So Nigerian price compared to Saudi Arabia, that is the biggest producer, is 5% cheaper than Saudi Arabia's per liter, including their taxes. Ghana, we are 30% cheaper than Ghana, which is $1.3. We are 70% cheaper than Senegal and Cote d'Ivoire, which is 1.7, 1.8. So where is the argument? Where did tell me where Central World Bank found out that said that Nigeria has a higher retail price? From where? Which African country? Are you comparing us to America? America that subsidizes their product that is self-sufficient? So the country says self-sufficiency in refining is our way forward. That is how we will rescue our country. Now, Dangote led that charge, got doubling his capacity. Somebody is involving more. Somebody is putting $50 billion more than Dangote in Ondo to refine. Bua is already ready with his 200,000 barrels. Then you have more modular refinery. You have another refinery in Lagos. So by the time you add all this capacity, there will be over 3 million barrels a day. Nigeria is only doing 1.7. So they will be twice Nigeria's capacity. So they are not being done for Nigeria. They are being done for the world to export power and energy from Nigeria. So how can somebody be advising you to the opposite when government has struggled now to say, okay, we are following our private sector. It is the way to go. Let's back them with policy. And somebody else is turning around to tell you, stop that, and then bring something. It's unbelievable. I think I just say it's unbelievable. I will never advise any of my member states in ECOWAS to do this. So we shouldn't expect that. That's why I'm totally unhappy. 90% of the report I love, because they always do that. If you look at this area like the human capital development, they do a report every year on human development index, which looks at what will happen to a child born today in 18 years time. So their recommendation on focusing on child education and all that is correct, because that is what we should do. And we are boarding last in that indices. If you go to UNDP Human Development Index, we're also boarding last there. So they are correct that we should do more to that. And when you come to social safety net, I take exception, because don't advise this government to break its own law. The law says you can borrow money for capital expenditure and human resource development. It didn't say you should borrow money to share to people. It didn't say you should borrow money to pay salary, borrow money to repay loan. You don't. That law doesn't allow it. The law says, and the law says to development finance, it warns them, say any lending to Nigerian government outside this framework is unlawful. So I have fought this for the last 3 years now. Central World Bank has turned around last quarter, in this third quarter, to say it is correct. You can do more on social safety, but use your internally generated revenue. So don't come and tell us you are ready to help and that we should do more on safety net. So it means you want to lend us more money to go and share. Give us your grant, we will share that and we'll thank you. They don't tell us to borrow money and go against our own fiscal law.
I like the fact that, Prof, I like the fact that you talked about the safety net, because you just took it out of my mouth. I was about talking about the safety net and the how that serves Nigeria, basically, because you've talked about it not being, but in practical terms, can Nigeria effectively implement and sustain such safety net without leakages and corruption? Because corruption is on one side. And we also look at this, the safety net, is it really a solution or just a temporary baggage for deeper structural problems? Those are questions which you've also put across, talking about it doesn't solve some things, it's just a way. But you are saying, give us something better and not just provide such things. But let's turn our focus, Prof, quickly, because of our time. On inflation and cost of living, fuel prices directly affect transport, food, and overall inflation. Would this recommendation not further worsen the cost of living crisis Nigeria already grappling with? Because, of course, we see that as a major concern for the citizens right now.
No, the thing is contrived. It shouldn't, because we are the dominant producer of crude in Africa. We shouldn't. The problem is this: PIA law says priority to domestic crude obligation. Give it to them. It's an obligation. They said no, they're not doing it. So what happens is that Dangote, with his 700,000 barrels, needs 20 shipload. They give him only 5. And even at the 5 that the NNPC gives to them, they are still charging them extra $3 per barrel. Now they now have to go through the back door to read to wholesalers that they sell the thing to go and market abroad, and go and buy it from them at extra $8 to $18 per barrel extra. And now they come back to the same market to come and refine them and sell them. So they are forced to increase the price. And even if the price increases, when the crude price went up to 118, 200% increase, they only increased their price by about 25%. When it was a 26% increase in the world market price, they increased only by 12%. So they are very reluctant to increase the price. We're very, very reluctant. Give them what the law says you should give them and see how they will protect the country. They will force down the price, and then they will export the more or less to bring more dollar into the economy. That is a contrivance. It's NNPC that's doing this, nobody else. And then supported by NMDPRA. That's the reality. So it is contrived. We have no problem with poverty of fuel caused by fuel, because we have it. We have the refining capacity. You cannot, okay, if Dangote has to go out to import, they will now face all these high import costs, shipping costs, then insurance. But if he's taking it from here, he doesn't need all that cost, and he gives us more. So that is the point. It's a contrivance. It's not real.
Well, clearly, sir, Prof, let's look at this. With all this debate over time, we've seen that from what you've also given us, liberalization, we look at, is it an opportunity or an economic gamble? The fall in importation, should it be a short-term fix or long-term dependency? Social safety nets as well, that's like is mentioned. We look at the solution or the illusion. From your perspective, in conclusion, basically, give us the way forward. What should stand that works? Clearly, putting out this debate from what the recommendations given by the bank and what you think should play better.
The social safety net is a good idea, because you cannot neglect those who are most vulnerable while you are articulating your high-end, high convoluted, but you must take good little care. But that is not a prescription for sustainability, economic sustainability. It is a temporary measure to cushion poverty. So you should have that, but use your internally generated revenue. For goodness sake, the law does not allow you to go and borrow money to do that. Let World Bank give you their grant. They have lots of grants in billions. Give it to us to share. Then government, cut your coat according to your side. Take substantial volume of your internal generated revenue and do that. That is the argument. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. You should do it. But you shouldn't go and borrow money to do that. The law doesn't allow. And let me tell you something. The law says capital expenditure. When you look at our budget, if the budget for borrowing is higher than the budget for capital expenditure, then you are borrowing money to pay salaries. You are borrowing money to share. Your borrowing should be less than the investment in capital expenditure. That is what tells us that, oh, you are borrowing for capital expenditure. That's the fundamental flaw in the economy. And that is why we ran into this big trouble end of last year, where we are owing 3 year, we have 3 year budget running concurrently. It is all because of the same problem. But then the way to solve them, the systemic way to solve them, is to develop capacity, local refining capacity, local economic sovereignty, local processing capacity, local value addition capacity, so that you can contain the problem of import dependence. That is the sustainable way to do it. You can now create jobs. You can now create lower poverty. But you're not doing it. You're exporting raw material, exporting your jobs, and you're importing poverty. That explains the dichotomy between good growth, important macroeconomic indicators, but you have poverty increasing. You have unemployment increasing. That is what tells you the reason why you're having that.
Thank you so much, Prof, for your time. You've really done justice to this, and we see that your recommendations as well is also looking at it, that this debate will also look for a better level playing field that when it will cushion the effects or the hardship effects on Nigerians. Thank you so much for your time. We've been speaking with Professor Ken Ife. He's one of the directors of Duvel Global Consulting, and like he mentioned, he's worked with the ECOWAS. He's worked for a long term, good enough time to be able to talk to us on policies like this. Thank you so much for your time, Prof. We look forward to more engagement and how policies on economy can stand tall and give Nigeria a better level playing field without hardship being felt so much. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your deep understanding. Thank you.
Okay, amazing. Well, we've had we've had Prof speak to us on all of these issues. Well, clearly the debate over Nigeria's foreign policy is far from settled. You know, while reforms may be necessary, the big question remains: whose interests do we truly serve?
Certainly.
And at what cost do the average Nigerians have to pay this price or benefits in the long run?
One thing I like about Prof's analysis is he was not overly critical of the report. They're just loopholes that he picked. So it's not as if you're not throwing away the baby alongside the bathwater. It's just for you to say this is what we need to fix. And basically, if those recommendations are followed, I think we'll be home and dry, basically.
All right. Well, that brings us to the size on this discussion segment. Up next is our next discussion. Please stay with us.